My name is Clara. I'm 35 years old and a single mother of two wonderful children, Emma and Noah. From the outside, growing up in a privileged household looked glamorous, but inside our grand estate lived a painful truth: favoritism. And no surprise, all of it leaned toward my older sister, Victoria. For years, I endured our traditional Sunday gatherings where my kids and I were treated like outsiders at my parents' table. It always stung, but last month, something as ordinary as a takeout order turned into the final straw, the breaking point that changed everything for me and my children. The night I finally stood my ground shocked everyone in the room, and it completely reshaped the course of our lives. Before I explain what happened that evening, I want to give you a glimpse into what life was like for me, the unfavored daughter. My parents, Charles and Margaret, had built a thriving real estate empire in Massachusetts, earning wealth most people could only dream about. Our childhood home was a sprawling colonial mansion with fountains in the garden, a guest house, and staff on payroll. But all that glitter came at a cost. Love in my family was always conditional. From the very beginning, Victoria was placed on a pedestal. She mirrored our mother's looks: golden hair, sparkling green eyes, and the kind of beauty that drew people in instantly. She was 4 years older than me and learned early that she could get whatever she wanted. Her ballet recitals were treated like national events. Her paintings were framed and displayed across the house as though she was a prodigy. Even the smallest achievements were celebrated with champagne and lavish parties. I, on the other hand, was the responsible child. My dark hair and gray eyes resembled my grandmother on my father's side, a woman my mother never liked. No matter how many awards I won or how much I excelled in school, my efforts were brushed aside with comments like, "Well, of course you did well. Clara, you don't have anything else distracting you." There were no parties in my honor, no framed certificates, just expectations that I'd continue quietly achieving without praise. When college came around, the bias only grew. Victoria was sent to Harvard with a generous monthly allowance, despite her average grades. Meanwhile, I earned a full scholarship to Columbia for education. Yet my choice of becoming a teacher was belittled as too humble for a girl from a wealthy family. Later, Victoria married Richard, a wealthy investment banker, in a wedding that looked like a royal gala. When I got engaged to Michael, an architect I loved deeply, the first thing my mother asked was, "Are you planning to sign a prenup?" A question she never once raised with Victoria. As the years went on, Victoria continued living her charmed life. She never had to work a day in her life. Her time was spent at charity galas, spa retreats, and endless social gatherings with other wealthy families. My parents gifted her and Richard a luxury townhouse as a wedding present, and they kept funding her extravagant lifestyle without hesitation. Meanwhile, I worked tirelessly as an elementary school teacher, pouring my heart into shaping young minds. The salary was modest, but the fulfillment was real. My life seemed steady until 3 years ago, when my world collapsed. Michael betrayed me with a colleague, and our marriage ended in a bitter divorce. I was left raising Emma and Noah on my own. Michael pays child support, but it's inconsistent, often late, and never enough. Instead of support, my parents only gave me lectures, questioning why I couldn't keep my husband and implying that I had failed as a wife. Despite it all, I carried immense pride in raising my children. Emma, now 10, is thoughtful and artistic. She spends hours reading, sketching, and writing short stories that capture her vivid imagination. Noah, 8, is my curious little scientist. He's always tinkering, asking questions, and trying out experiments in our small kitchen. Both of them are polite and kind-hearted something their teachers never fail to point out at every conference. Our family's tradition of weekly Sunday dinners at my parents' mansion began when both Victoria and I had kids. My mother insisted on these gatherings, claiming it was important for family unity, but those dinners quickly turned into another stage where Favoritism played out loud and clear. Victoria's children, Ethan, 12, and Chloe, 9, always showed up flaunting the newest gadgets and designer clothes. They interrupted conversations, made demands for special meals, and often broke things around the house, yet never faced consequences. My kids, on the other hand, were expected to sit quietly, accept whatever was served, and never complain. If they offered to help clean up, they were brushed aside with lines like, "The staff will handle that, dear." And of course, the subtle jabs never stopped. Comments like, "That blouse looks practical, teachers must be frugal with their wardrobes," or "Your kids seem healthy," enough even without expensive activities. Over time, these remarks piled up like invisible weights on my shoulders. I tolerated it all, convincing myself it was worth it for Emma and Noah to know their grandparents, even if it came at the cost of my own dignity. But as the years passed, the treatment only grew worse. Victoria had just returned from a lavish 3-week trip to Europe, fully paid for by my parents as her mental health break. Meanwhile, I was working summer school just to afford back-to-school clothes for Emma and Noah. Every Sunday, she'd brag about Persian cafes and Italian beaches while casting smug glances at me. My parents would beam with pride at her adventures, conveniently ignoring that my children had never been on even a modest vacation. I had swallowed my pride for so long, but I never could have imagined that one ordinary dinner, sparked by a simple takeout order, would ignite a fire that changed everything. That particular Sunday began like any other in our small 2-bedroom apartment. I woke early, even though it was my only day to sleep in. Emma needed help finishing her science project for Monday, and Noah wanted to practice his reading with me. The sunlight streamed through our thin curtains as I flipped dinosaur-shaped pancakes, our little tradition that made tight budgets feel less heavy. "Mom, do you think Grandma will like the picture I drew for her?" Emma asked as she carefully tucked her drawing into a folder. She had spent hours creating a family portrait, down to the fine details of my mother's favorite brooch. "It's beautiful, honey," I told her gently, though inside I feared it would end up shoved into a drawer, forgotten, while Victoria's kids' half-hearted doodles always found their way into gold frames on the walls by noon. We were preparing a homemade apple crumble to bring along. My parents never expected Victoria to bring anything, but I was raised to believe you should never arrive empty-handed. Even though I was their daughter, I always felt more like a guest in that mansion. "Can I sprinkle the topping, Mom?" Noah asked, stretching on tiptoe to see the mixing bowl. "Of course, buddy. Just like I showed you gently, like you're feeding little birds." Just as we finished, I noticed liquid dripping beneath my 10-year-old car. My heart sank. Repairs were nowhere in this month's already stretched budget. "Everything okay, Mom?" Emma asked, concern in her eyes. "Just a small car problem," I said with a forced smile. I called Rick, our kind neighbor who worked as a mechanic. 45 minutes and $100 later, the car was patched enough to get us through the trip. But the unexpected expense meant delaying new shoes for Emma, whose sneakers were already falling apart. By the time we finally got on the road, we were half an hour late. I phoned my mother to explain, only to be met with a sharp sigh and "Reliability is a virtue. Clara, the tension headache I always felt before those dinners was already pounding behind my eyes." We pulled up to the mansion gates at 4:45. 45 minutes past the requested arrival. The driveway sparkled with luxury cars, including Victoria's brand new Range Rover, her second new car in less than a year. "Wow, did Aunt Victoria get another car?" Noah whispered as we carried the apple crumble up the marble steps. "It looks like it," I replied softly, not wanting to stir resentment in my kids. The door swung open before we could ring. Marjorie, the longtime housekeeper, greeted us warmly. Her kind eyes were often the only welcome we received. "They're in the main room, Miss Clara," she whispered. "The mood is tense today. It was her way of warning me to tread carefully, as we walked into the grand living room. My mother's sharp voice cut through the air. Finally decided to join us, Clara? We were about to send a search party. She didn't rise to greet us. Perched instead on her antique chair, wine glass in hand, I forced a smile. Sorry we're late. Car trouble. We brought dessert. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. Marjorie, take that to the kitchen, he instructed, ignoring us completely. On the sofa, Victoria smirked, tossing her perfectly styled hair. Car trouble again? Maybe if you bought something reliable like an adult? Her children sprawled across the floor, playing on shiny new tablets. Emma stepped forward shyly, holding out her drawing. I made this for you, Grandma. My mother accepted the paper between two fingers, as if it might soil her blouse. How creative. Marjorie put this somewhere safe. Without another glance, she handed it off to the housekeeper. I felt Emma's shoulders slump beside me, her little heart breaking. I squeezed her hand and whispered, It's beautiful, sweetheart. Maybe Grandma can frame it for her office. My mother only made a dismissive sound, already turning her attention back to Chloe, who was unwrapping an antique doll she had just been given. Noah stood awkwardly at my side, watching as Ethan showed off his brand new gaming tablet to my father, who actually looked interested in something. He never showed when Noah excitedly shared his science experiments. My mother's critical gaze swept over Emma and Noah. Looks like the children have outgrown their clothes again. Such an inconvenient stage, always needing new things. Before I could answer, Victoria chimed in sweetly, Well, some of us plan ahead, Mother. Not everyone waits until their kids look like they shop at thrift stores. The words cut through me like glass, but I kept my face neutral. Years of practice had taught me how to swallow pain without flinching. We're doing fine. Thank you, I said quietly, pulling my children closer. Still, I could sense something unusual about that evening. My father was checking his phone every few minutes, brows furrowed. My mother, normally the perfect hostess, hadn't offered us a single refreshment. And Victoria, between smug smiles, kept mentioning that her husband Richard was away on business indefinitely, repeating it with odd emphasis. After about 20 minutes of strained small talk, my mother suddenly announced, I am far too tired to cook after organizing the garden club luncheon yesterday. We'll order takeout tonight. The room fell silent. In 15 years of Sunday dinners, my mother had never suggested takeout. She prided herself on lavish home-cooked spreads and often made condescending remarks about families too lazy to prepare real meals. My father nodded in agreement. An excellent idea. No expense spared. The children should have whatever they want. The way he said children, his eyes flicking only toward Victoria's kids, made it painfully clear which grandchildren he meant. We were ushered into the grand living room with its soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured gardens. Ethan and Chloe immediately flopped onto the pale sofa with their shoes on, leaving dirt marks Marjorie would later scrub away. My children, careful as ever, sat stiffly on the edge of a love seat, back straight, hands folded. My father pulled out his leather notebook and pen, the same ones he used for business deals. Now, then, what shall we order, Margaret? Perhaps start with the children. My mother smiled warmly at Victoria's kids. Ethan, Chloe, what would you like for dinner tonight? Anything at all. Ethan didn't even glance up from his screen. Sushi, with special dragon rolls. With the gold flakes like we had in Tokyo, Chloe twirled her hair around her finger. I want pasta from Vincenzo's, the one with the truffle sauce, and garlic bread, and tiramisu. My father nodded with pride as he scribbled down their extravagant requests. Excellent choices. We'll order from both restaurants. Nothing but the best. Victoria stretched lazily on the sofa. I'll have the seared salmon with risotto from Vincenzo's, and Their imported sparkling water. My mother glanced at my father expectantly. I'll join Ethan with the sushi. Perhaps steak as well, he added, jotting it all down. I glanced at my children, who were whispering to one another, hopeful. Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of pasta, her favorite, but one we rarely indulged in. Noah's face brightened at the thought of ordering a hamburger. I smiled at them softly, thinking maybe, just maybe, this dinner could be a small bright spot in an otherwise painful routine. But once everyone else finished ordering, silence fell. My kids sat waiting, expectant, their small faces turned toward their grandparents. I waited too, giving them the chance to be asked. The seconds stretched painfully long. Finally, I leaned forward gently, prompting, "Emma, Noah, what would you two like to eat?" Before they could speak, my mother's face hardened into ice. With a dismissive flick of her manicured hand, she said flatly, "Your children can eat whatever scraps are left in the kitchen. They are not guests here." The words hung in the air like a slap. Emma froze. Noah's little hand clutched mine tightly. My chest tightened, breath caught in my throat. Victoria snorted. "And don't forget, Clara, you'll be covering my meals this week too. Since I'm staying here while Richard's away." Mother and father agreed. "They're covering Ethan and Chloe, so you can handle me." I stared at her in disbelief. My father cleared his throat, voice sharp with authority. "Don't just sit there looking confused. Go set the table like a good little servant. That's what you're good at, taking care of details no one else wants to bother with." In that instant, something inside me snapped into place. Years of humiliation, of subtle digs, of watching my children treated as less than all of it, condensed into a single, blinding clarity. This was no family gathering. This was a power game. And I was done playing. I looked down at Emma and Noah, their wide, confused eyes, the pain on their young faces, and I knew. If I stayed silent now, I wouldn't just be teaching them patience. I'd be teaching them to accept disrespect as normal. And I could never allow that. With a calmness that even surprised me, I squeezed their hands. "Emma, Noah." "We're leaving," I said firmly, rising from the love seat. My father's head snapped up from his notebook. "Don't be ridiculous, Clara. You're overreacting, as always." "Sit down." My mother's lips curled into a cold smile. "You always do this, make a scene over nothing. The children can have sandwiches from the kitchen." "Stop being dramatic." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Here comes the martyr act. Poor Clara, always persecuted. Just accept it, some people matter more than others. That's life." I turned to her, my voice steady. "No, that's your life. Not ours. Not anymore." My father slammed his pen onto the notebook. "Sit down, Clara. This childish display is embarrassing. We have important matters to discuss after dinner, family finances. You will stay." The pieces clicked in my mind, the suitcases I'd seen in the hall. Victoria's odd comments about staying the week, the tension humming in the air. This dinner wasn't about family at all. It was about cornering me. They wanted something, and suddenly, I realized I didn't care what it was. "I'm sure you do have important matters," I said calmly, guiding my children toward the door. "But they'll have to wait. We deserve respect. If we can't find it here, then we'll find it elsewhere." My mother's eyes flashed with genuine shock, as if she'd never believed I'd actually walk away. "You can't just leave. What about family loyalty?" I almost laughed at the irony. "Loyalty goes both ways, Mother." I knelt down, helping Emma and Noah into their jackets. Their little faces were a mixture of fear and relief. "We're going to have a special dinner somewhere else tonight," I whispered to them. "Are you sure, Mom?" Emma whispered back, "Grandma seems really mad." "I'm very sure, sweetheart," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We deserve better." As we headed for the door, Victoria appeared in the hallway, blocking the way with her perfectly polished smile. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with spite, "the only reason you were invited today is because they need something from you." I told them you'd never agree unless they broke you down first. Her words confirmed everything. My father's voice thundered from behind her. "Clara, stop this nonsense immediately. Your sister needs your help, and as family, you are obligated to provide it." I looked at the three of them, their faces tight with entitlement, their voices echoing with demands, and for the first time in my life, I felt no fear. "Only freedom. You've never helped me," I said quietly. "Not when Michael left. Not when Emma needed braces. Not when Noah was sick and I had no one to watch him. All I've ever gotten from you is criticism and humiliation. That ends tonight," and with that I opened the door, stepped into the night air with my children, and walked away. For the first time in years, I felt light-eyed as we stepped into the cool evening air. Noah looked up at me with worried eyes. "Mom, are we in trouble?" he whispered, his small hand clutching mine. I bent down and kissed his forehead. "No, sweetheart. For the first time, we're out of trouble." I buckled the kids into our worn Honda, started the engine, and pulled out of the mansion's long driveway. Their faces, reflected in the rearview mirror, were a mix of confusion and relief. My phone buzzed again and again in my bag, their names flashing across the screen: my father, my mother, Victoria. I ignored them all thought instead. I glanced back at Emma and Noah and made a spontaneous decision. How would you two feel about dinner at Morton's Steakhouse tonight? Their eyes widened in disbelief. "Really? The fancy place with chandeliers?" Emma gasped. Noah nearly bounced in his seat. "Do they have hamburgers?" I laughed softly. "Yes, they do. And tonight you can order whatever you want." When we arrived, our modest Honda looked painfully out of place between luxury cars, but the valet opened the doors with the same polite flourish. Inside, the restaurant glowed with golden light, filled with the quiet hum of wealthy diners in suits and gowns. The hostess gave us a curious look, no doubt noting our casual Sunday clothes, but she smiled anyway. "We just had a cancellation. We can seat you in 15 minutes. I exhaled in relief. "That's perfect. Thank you." As we waited in the lobby, Emma tugged my sleeve. "Mom, can we really eat here? Isn't it too expensive?" I knelt beside her, holding her hand. "Sometimes, sweetheart, you have to remind yourself of your own worth. Tonight is one of those times." Noah's wide eyes darted around the glittering dining room. "This place is so fancy. Do they really let kids like us eat here?" I had Tim close. "Of course they do. We belong anywhere we choose to be." When we were seated at a table draped in crisp white linen, a friendly waiter named Anthony brought menus and introduced himself. Emma and Noah ordered sodas, a rare treat in our home, while I treated myself to a glass of wine, something I almost never allowed. When the waiter returned, Noah grinned as he ordered the biggest cheeseburger on the menu, complete with aged cheddar and truffle aioli. Emma chose grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, her eyes shining with excitement. I picked a modest chicken dish, still mindful of our budget, but unwilling to spoil the moment. As our drinks arrived, Emma glanced at me curiously. "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us now?" I sipped my wine, steadying my voice. "Probably. But being upset doesn't give anyone the right to treat you unkindly." Noah frowned. "Why did Grandma say we should eat scraps? Did we do something wrong?" My heart ached. I reached across the table and held his little hand. "No, my love. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Sometimes adults are cruel because of their own problems, but their cruelty says everything about them and nothing about you." Emma hesitated before asking, "Is Aunt Victoria really going to live with us? Our place is so small, and Ethan and Chloe always break our things." I smiled gently and squeezed her hand. No, honey. Our home is our safe space, and we decide who comes into it. For the first time all day, I saw them relax, the tension leaving their shoulders, their smiles beginning to return. When the food finally arrived, beautifully plated, their eyes widened with awe. This is the biggest burger I've ever seen, Noah exclaimed. My salmon has flowers on it, Emma whispered in amazement. Pointing at the edible garnish, we savored every bite. For once, the food wasn't just nourishment, it was a symbol. Proof that we deserve better than scraps. After finishing our main courses, I excused myself and slipped into the elegant restroom. My reflection in the mirror looked tired, but there was also something new in my eyes' resolve. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long moment before finally dialing a number I hadn't called in years. The line rang 3 times before a warm, familiar voice answered. Clara? Is that really you, dear? Hello, Godmother Evelyn, I said softly, my voice cracking just a little. I hope it's not too late to call. Evelyn Harper had been my mother's college roommate and once her closest friend, before a falling out that my parents never fully explained. Despite the distance, she had remained my godmother, sending birthday cards, thoughtful gifts, and notes of encouragement whenever she could. She was widowed, childless, and, according to family whispers, very wealthy from her late husband's tech investments. It's never too late to hear from you, she said kindly. But you sound upset. What's wrong? Something about her gentle concern broke down the wall I had held up all evening. The words poured out of me. I told her everything about the years of subtle favoritism, tonight's cruel dismissal of my children, Victoria's smug entitlement, and my parents' constant criticism. I confessed how it had all come to a head when my kids were told to eat scraps while their cousins ordered gold-flecked sushi. When I finally fell silent, there was a long pause. My heart pounded, wondering if I had overstepped. Then Evelyn spoke, her voice steady and sad. I've been waiting for this call for a very long time. You knew? I whispered, stunned. Of course, Clara. Why do you think your mother and I stopped speaking? I called her out years ago for the way she treated you. I begged her to balance the favoritism, to make sure you felt loved. Instead, she told me never to interfere again, and she threatened to cut me out of your life if I ever told you the truth. So I stayed at the edges, sending gifts, hoping that one day you'd see it for yourself. Tears stung my eyes. I never knew, and now you do, she said softly. So what happens next? I swallowed hard. I don't know. I walked out on them tonight. Victoria apparently needs a place to stay, which means she and Richard are having problems. My car barely runs, my budget is tight, and I just splurged on Morton's of all places. It feels like madness. To my surprise, Evelyn laughed gently. Good for you. Think of it as your declaration of independence. And Clara, don't worry about the cost. I have more resources than I could ever use. I always planned to leave you a large inheritance, but I see no reason to wait. I want to help you and the children now. My breath caught. Evelyn, I didn't call you for money. I know you didn't, she interrupted firmly. That's why I trust you. You've worked hard, been strong for your children, and carried far too much weight alone. Let me lift some of it. I'll set up a trust for you and the kids right away. I leaned against the marble counter, overwhelmed. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. And Clara, Evelyn added, her tone sharpening, you should also know something important. Your parents' perfect empire is not what it seems. Charles's business has been failing for years. Their mansion is heavily mortgaged, and the last loan they took was from me. They're months behind on payments. I wanted to see if, when they truly needed help, they finally treat you as an equal. Tonight gave me my answer. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. My parents weren't untouchable after all. Their power, the very thing they lorded over me, was crumbling. When I returned to the table, Emma and Noah were happily sharing a giant slice of chocolate cake, faces glowing with joy. My phone was buzzing with missed calls and texts, but for the first time, I didn't care. I sat down, smiling at my children. "Everything is going to change," I whispered. And I believed it. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, though, for the first time in years. My chest didn't feel heavy. I called the school to request a rare personal day and arranged for my neighbor Sandra to take the kids after classes. At exactly 9 a.m., there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, Evelyn stood there, elegant as always in a navy suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. Beside her was a serious-looking man carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning, my dear," she greeted warmly, pulling me into a hug. "This is Mr. Greenberg, my attorney. I hope you don't mind. I thought it was best to formalize things quickly." We sat at my small kitchen table with steaming mugs of coffee while Mr. Greenberg laid out neatly organized documents. Evelyn explained everything with calm precision. "The mortgage on your parents' estate is in default," she said gently. "Normally, they'd have months to fight it, but because of certain clauses in our agreement and some recent misrepresentations on their part, I can call the loan immediately due. In simple terms, Charles and Margaret are about to lose the mansion." I froze, my coffee halfway to my lips. "They could really lose everything?" Evelyn nodded. "They already have. They've been living in denial. Their empire has been collapsing for years. They borrowed desperately to maintain appearances, but the debts have finally caught up. And Victoria? Her husband didn't leave on business. He left her. She secretly racked up more than $500,000 in credit card debt, even mortgaging their house behind his back. He walked away. Their home is already in foreclosure. That's why they planned to corner you last night." My stomach twisted. For years, they had looked down on me while hiding their own failures behind polished smiles. Mr. Greenberg slid a paper across the table. "Mrs. Harper has instructed me to establish a trust for you and your children immediately. The initial funding will be $5 million, with provisions for education, housing, and health care. You will serve as trustee with full control over distributions." I nearly dropped my coffee. $5 million? Evelyn smiled gently. "It's only a fraction of what you'll eventually inherit, but enough to secure your independence. You'll never have to beg your parents for help again." Before I could even process it, another knock rattled the door, this time hard and insistent. I opened it to find my entire family standing there. My father looked unshaven, his tie missing. My mother's hair was unstyled for the first time I could remember, her face drawn tight. Victoria's eyes were swollen from crying, and her children clung to her, confused and cranky. "We need to talk," my father barked. Trying to push past me into the apartment, I blocked the doorway firmly. "This isn't a good time." Then my mother caught sight of Evelyn at the table with her attorney. Her eyes widened. "So it's true. You've aligned yourself with her against us?" Evelyn rose slowly, her presence commanding. "Charles, Margaret, Victoria. What a surprise." I was just explaining to Clara the new arrangements for her and her children. My father's face flushed with anger. "This is a family matter, Evelyn. You have no right to interfere." Evelyn's voice was cool and unshaken. "I gained every right when you mortgaged your estate to me. And when you defaulted, Charles, you handed me full control." Victoria stepped forward, desperation cracking through her polished mask. "Clara, please, you have to help us. They're going to take everything. Where will Ethan and Chloe live?" For the first time, I really saw her, not the flawless, pampered golden child, but a woman terrified and broken. A pang of sympathy flickered in me, not for her entitlement, but for her children. I stepped aside at last. "Fine, come in. But if we're going to talk, it will be on my terms. Once inside, the contrast was almost laughable, my wealthy parents standing stiff and out of place in my modest apartment, Victoria clinging to her children as if the walls might close in. I sent Emma and Noah to their room with Ethan and Chloe, handing them a tablet to keep busy. Before facing the adults in my tiny living room, my father wasted no time. This is all Evelyn's doing her manipulative schemes. She's poisoned you against us. I raised my hand, cutting him off. No more shouting. No more blaming. If we're going to talk, then we talk honestly. No more lies, Evelyn sat calmly, while my mother dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. The truth came out in jagged fragments. My father admitted his real estate empire had been hemorrhaging money for years, sustained only by desperate, risky loans. He had remortgaged the mansion multiple times until even the banks refused him credit. Evelyn's loan was their last lifeline, and they were months behind on it. Victoria's perfect image cracked further. Her husband had left her after discovering she'd secretly maxed out credit cards and mortgaged their house without telling him. The home was already gone, swallowed by debt. She had nowhere else to go. As they spoke, my mother kept wringing her hands, alternating between excuses and faintly veiled accusations that I was being selfish for not offering immediate help. Finally, I couldn't hold back anymore. Do you even hear yourselves? You tell my children they're worth nothing more than scraps, and now you stand here asking me to save you? Do you understand how twisted that is? My mother flinched. That was unfortunate wording. The stress, no, Evelyn cut in sharply. The stress doesn't make you dismiss your grandchildren like that. It reveals what you truly think of them. Silence fell, heavy and uncomfortable. For the first time, my father had no ready retort. I drew in a steady breath. Here are my terms. Victoria and her children can stay here for 2 weeks while they find proper housing. During that time, you will respect my home and, most importantly, my children. After that, I'll help connect you with affordable housing and financial counseling. But that is as far as I will go. My father's face darkened, his jaw tight. 2 weeks? Counseling? Do you have any idea who you're talking to? Yes, I said evenly. I'm talking to family members who never showed me basic respect, and who are now standing in my apartment asking for my help. These are my boundaries. Take them or leave with nothing. For the first time in my life, my father was speechless. My mother looked like she might faint. And Victoria, she just stared at me, a mixture of resentment and something else, maybe. For the first time, respect. I sat back, my voice steady. Those are the rules. They're not negotiable. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. Their control over me had never been real. It had always depended on my silence, my craving for their approval. Now that I no longer needed it, their power vanished like smoke in the wind. 6 months can change everything. Now, as I sit on the back porch of our new home, watching Emma and Noah play freely in the yard with their cousins, I can hardly believe how far we've come since that fateful Sunday dinner. First weeks after the confrontation were difficult but necessary. True to my word, I allowed Victoria and her children to stay in our cramped apartment for 2 weeks. The close quarters forced conversations we had avoided for years. One late night, after the kids were asleep, Victoria finally broke down. Through tears, she admitted how much she had secretly envied me, envied my independence, my ability to build a life without leaning on our parents. You built something real, she whispered. I only ever knew how to play the part they wanted. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first fragile step toward mutual respect. With Evelyn's help, I purchased a warm 4-bedroom home in a good school district. For the first time in years, I could breathe without worrying how I'd cover the next emergency. The trust she set up guaranteed Emma and Noah's future college, healthcare, stability, All the things I had carried alone on my shoulders dealt my parents had no choice but to downsize. They left behind the mansion and moved into a modest condo. At first, my mother mourned the loss of her social standing, but slowly she began volunteering in the community. My father, stripped of his collapsing business, discovered an unlikely hobby: woodworking. I never thought I'd see him content with something so simple. Victoria eventually found her own apartment and, for the first time in her life, took a job at a boutique clothing store. It wasn't glamorous, but I could see the pride in her eyes when she talked about helping customers or managing displays. Her children, Ethan and Chloe, struggled at first but slowly adapted. Without the constant comparisons and privilege, they began to bond genuinely with Emma and Noah. Another condition I set was family therapy. It wasn't easy. Old wounds surfaced, voices were raised, and sometimes we left sessions exhausted. But slowly, walls began to crack. Our therapist reminded us often, boundaries aren't walls. They're fences with gates you control. You decide who comes in and how much access to give. That wisdom became my anchor. Evelyn became more than a godmother. She became the grandmother figure my children deserved. She joined us for dinners, listened to their stories with genuine interest, and celebrated their little victories. For the first time, I felt like my family was whole, even if it didn't look like the one I was born into. One Sunday evening, 6 months after the Takeout incident, I hosted dinner in my new home. The scene was so different from the old days, it almost brought me to tears. The conversation flowed naturally. There was no judgment, no competition. When Emma proudly showed her art project, my mother actually studied it and offered thoughtful praise. Later, as I cleared the dishes, my father quietly told me, "You've built a beautiful life, Clara, and you've done an incredible job with your children." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. The journey hasn't been perfect. Old habits resurface. Victoria sometimes slips into entitlement. My mother occasionally makes careless comparisons. My father still struggles to show interest consistently. But the difference now is this: I no longer swallow the hurt in silence. I address it. I set boundaries. And as I watch Emma and Noah standing taller, speaking more confidently, I know I've already won the most important battle. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from a table where love is served with conditions and build your own, where everyone is equally nourished.